Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and we are back with more Southern Horrors and Other Writings by Ida B. Wells. Today we'll be doing two pieces: The New Cry and The Malicious and Untruthful White Press. So yeah, chapters 3 and 4 of the part we're reading. But let's hop into this. The appeal of the Southern whites to Northern sympathy and sanction the adroit, insidious plea made by Bishop Fitzgerald for suspension of judgment because those who condemn lynching express no sympathy for the white woman in the case falls to the ground in light of the foregoing. From this exposition of the race issue in lynch law, the whole matter is explained by the well-known opposition growing out of slavery and the progress of the race. This is crystallized by the oft-repeated slogan, "This is white man's country and the white man must rule." The South resented giving the Afro-American his freedom, the ballot box, and civil rights laws. The raids of the Ku Klux and the White Liners to subvert Reconstruction government, the Hamburg and Ellerton, South Carolina, the Copiah County, Mississippi, and the Lafayette Parish, Louisiana massacres were excused as a natural resentment of intelligence against government by ignorance. Honest white men practically conceded the necessity of intelligence, murdering ignorance to correct the mistake of the general government, and the race was left to the tender mercies of the solid South. Thoughtful Afro-Americans, with the strong arm of the government withdrawn and with the hope to stop such wholesale massacres, urged the race to sacrifice its political rights for sake of peace. They honestly believed the race should fit itself for government, and when that should be done, the objection to race participation in politics would be removed. But the sacrifice did not remove the trouble, nor did the South to justice. One by one, the Southern states have legally disenfranchised the Afro-American, and since the repeal of the Civil Rights Bill, nearly every Southern state has passed separate car laws with a penalty against their infringement. The race, regardless of advancement, is pinned into filthy, stifling partitions cut off from smoking cars. All this while, although the political cause has been removed, the butcheries of black men at Barnwell, South Carolina, Carrollton, Mississippi, Waycross, Georgia, and Memphis, Tennessee have gone on. Also, the flaying alive of a man in Kentucky, the burning of one in Arkansas, the hanging of a 15-year-old girl in Louisiana, a woman in Jackson, Tennessee, and one in Hollandale, Mississippi, until the dark and bloody record of the South shows 728 Afro-Americans lynched during the past 8 years. Not 50 of these were for political causes. The rest were for all manner of accusations, from that of rape of white women to the case of the boy Will Lewis, who was hanged at Tullahoma, Tennessee last year for being drunk and sassy to white folks. These statistics compiled by the Chicago Tribune were given the first of this year, 1892. Since then, not less than 150 have been known to have met violent death at the hands of cruel, bloodthirsty mobs during the past 9 months. To palliate this record, which grows worse as the Afro Americans become intelligent and excuse some of the almost heinous crimes that ever stain the history of a country, the South is shielding itself behind the plausible screen of defending the horror or the honor of its women. This, too, in the face of the fact that only 1/3 of the 728 victims to mobs have been charged with rape, to say nothing of those that 1/3 who were innocent of the charge. A white correspondent of the Baltimore Sun declares that the Afro-American who was lynched in Chestertown, Maryland in May for assault on a white girl was innocent, that the deed was done by a white man who had since disappeared. The girl herself maintained that her assailant was a white man. When the poor Afro-American was murdered, the whites excused their refusal of a trial on the ground that they wished to spare the white girl from the mortification of having to testify in court. This cry has had its effect. It has closed the heart, stifled the conscience, warped the judgment, and hushed the voice of press and pulpit on the subject of lynch law throughout this land of liberty. Men who stand high in the esteem of the public for Christian character, for moral and physical courage, for devotion to the principles of equal and exact justice for all, and for great sagacity, stand as cowards who fear to open their mouths before the great outrage. They do not see that by their tacit encouragement, their silent acquiescence, the black shadow of lawlessness in the form of lynch law is spreading its wings over the whole country. Men who, like Governor Tillman, start the ball of lynch law rolling for a certain crime are powerless to stop it when drunken or criminal white toughs feel like hanging the Afro-American on any pretext. Even to the better class of Afro-Americans, the crime of rape is so revolting they have too often taken the white man's word and given lynch law neither the investigation nor condemnation it deserved. They forget that a concession of a right to lynch a man for a certain crime not only concedes the right to lynch any person for any crime, but so frequently as the cry of rape now raised, it is the fair way to stamp us a race of rapists and desperados. They have gone on hoping and believing that general education and financial strength would solve the difficulty, and are devoting their energies to the accumulation of both. The mob spirit has grown with the increasing intelligence of the Afro-American. It has left the out-of-the-way places where ignorance prevails, has thrown off the mask, and with this new cry stalks in broad daylight in large cities, the centers of civilization, and is encouraged by the leading citizens and the press. The Daily Commercial and Evening Scimitar of Memphis, Tennessee are owned by leading businessmen of that city, and yet, in spite of the fact that there have been no white woman in Memphis outraged by Afro-American, and that Memphis possessed a thrifty, law-abiding property owning class of Afro-Americans, and commercial of May 17th under the head of More Rapes, More Lynchings gave utterance to the following. The lynching of 3 Negro scoundrels reported in the dispatch from Anniston, Alabama, for the brutal outrage committed upon a white woman will be a text for much comment on Southern barbarism by Northern newspapers. But we fancy it will hardly prove effective for campaign purposes among intelligent people. The frequency of these lynchings calls attention to the frequency of the crimes which causes lynching. The Southern barbarism, which deserves the serious attention of all people, North and South, is the barbarism which preys upon the weak and defenseless women. Nothing but the most prompt, speedy, and extreme punishment can hold in check the horrible and bestial propensities of the Negro race. There is a strange similarity about the number of cases of this character which have lately occurred. In each case, the crime was deliberately planned and perpetrated by several Negroes. They watched for an opportunity when the women were left without a protector. It was not a sudden yielding to a fit of passion, but the consummation of a devilish purpose which has been seeking and waiting for the opportunity. This feature of the crime not only makes it the most fiendishly brutal, but it adds to the terror of the situation in the thinly settled country communities. No man can leave his family at night without the dread of some roving Negro ruffian is watching and waiting for this opportunity. The swift punishment which inevitably follows these horrible crimes doubtless acts as a deterring effect upon Negroes in that the immediate neighborhood for a short time, but the lesson is not widely learned nor long remembered. Then such crimes equally atrocious have happened in quick succession, one in Tennessee, one in Arkansas, and one in Alabama. These facts of the crime appear to appeal more in the Negro's lustful imagination than the facts of the punishments due to his fears. He sets aside all fear of death in any form when opportunity is found for the gratification of his bestial desires. There is a small reason to hope for any change for the better. The commission of this crime grows more frequent every year. The generation of Negroes which have grown up since the war have lost in large measure the traditional and wholesome awe of the white race which kept the Negroes in subjection even when the masters were in the army and their families left unprotected except by the slaves themselves. There is no longer a restraint upon the brute passion of the Negro. What is to be done? The crime of rape is always horrible, but the Southern man, there is nothing which so fills the soul with horror, loathing, and fury as the outraging of a white woman by a Negro. It is a race question in the ugliest, vilest, most dangerous aspect. The Negro as a political factor can be controlled, but neither laws of lynchings can subdue his lust. Sooner or later it will force a crisis. We do not know in what form it will come. In its issue on July 4th, the Memphis Evening Scimitar gives the following excuse for lynch law. Aside from the violation of white women by Negroes, which is in the outcropping of the bestial perversion of instinct, the chief cause of trouble between the races in the South is the Negro's lack of manners. In the state of slavery, he learned politeness from association with white people who took pains to teach him. Since the emancipation came and the tie of mutual interest and regard between master and servant was broken, the Negro has drifted away into a state which is neither freedom nor bondage. Lacking the proper inspiration of the one and the restraining force of the other, he has taken up the idea that boorish insolence is independence, and the exercise of a decent degree of breeding toward white people is identical with servile submission. In consequence of the prevalence of this notion, there are many Negroes who use every opportunity to make themselves offensive, particularly when they think they can be done with impunity. We have too many instances right here in Memphis to doubt this, and our experience is not exceptional. The white people won't stand for this sort of thing, and whether they be insulted as individuals or as a race, the response will be prompt and effectual. The bloody riot of 1866, in which so many Negroes perished, was brought on principally by the outrageous conduct of the blacks towards the whites on the streets. It is also a remarkable and discouraging fact that the majority of such scoundrels are Negroes, and who have received educational advantages at the hands of white taxpayers. They have got just enough of learning to make them realize how hopelessly their race is behind the other in everything that makes a people great. And they attempt to get even by insolence, which is ever the resentment of inferiors. There are well-bred Negroes among us, and it is truly unfortunate that they should have to pay, even in part, the penalty of the offenses committed by the baser sort. But this is the way of the world. The innocent must suffer for the guilty. If the Negroes as a people possessed 100th part of the self-respect which is evidenced by the courteous bearing of some of the scimitar could name, the friction between the races would be reduced to a minimum. It will not do to beg the question by pleading that many white men are also stirring up strife. The Caucasian background simply obeys the promptings of a depraved disposition, and he is seldomly deliberately rough or offensive towards strangers or unprotected women. The Negro, though, on the contrary, is given to just that kind of offending, and he almost invariably singles out white people as his victims. On March the 9th, 1892, there were lynched in the same city 3 of the best specimens of young since the war Afro-American manhood. They were peaceful, law-abiding citizens and energetic businessmen. They believed the problem was to be solved by eschewing the politics and putting money in the purse. They owned a flourishing grocery business in a thickly populated suburb of Memphis, and a white man named Barrett had one in the opposite corner. After a personal difficulty with Barrett sought by going into the people's grocery, drawing a pistol, and was thrashed by Calvin McDowell, he, Barrett, threatened to clean them out. These men were a mile beyond the city limits and police protection. Hearing that Barrett's crowd was coming to attack them Saturday night, They mustered forces and prepared to defend themselves against the attack. When Barrett came, he led a posse of officers, 12 in number, who afterward claimed to be hunting a man for whom they had a warrant. That 12 men in citizens' clothes should think it necessary to go into the night to hunt one man who had never before been arrested or made any record as a criminal has never been explained. When they entered the back door of the young men thought the threatened attack was on and fired into them. 3 of the officers were wounded, and when the defending party found it was officers of the law upon whom they had fired, they ceased and got away. 31 men were arrested and thrown in jail as conspirators, although they all declared more than once they did not know they were firing on officers. Excitement was at fever heat until the morning papers 2 days after announced that the wounded deputy sheriffs were out of danger. This hindered rather than helped the plans of the whites. There was no law on the statute books that would execute the Afro-Americans for wounding a white man, but the unwritten law did. 3 of these men, the president, manager, and clerk of the grocery, the leaders of the conspiracy, were secretly taken from jail and lynched in a shockingly brutal manner. The Negroes are getting too independent, they say. We must teach them a lesson. What lesson? The lesson of insubordination. Or the lesson of subordination. Kill the leaders and it will cow the Negro who dares to shoot a white man even in self-defense. Although the race was wild over the outrage, the mockery of law and justice which disarmed men and locked them up in jails where they could be easily and safely reached by the mob. The Afro-American ministers, newspapers, and leaders counseled obedience to the law which did not protect them. Their counsel was heeded and not a hand was uplifted to resent the outrage. Following the advice of the free speech, people left the city in great numbers. The dailies and Associated Press reports herald these men to the county as toughs and Negro desperados who kept a low dive. This same press service printed that the Negro who was lynched in Indianola, Mississippi in May had outraged the sheriff's 8-year-old daughter. The girl was more than 18 years old and was found by her father in this man's room, who was a servant on the place. Not content with misrepresenting the race, the mob spirit was not to be satisfied until the paper, which was doing all it could to counteract this impression, was silenced. The colored people were resenting their bad treatment in a way to make itself felt, yet gave the mob no excuse for further murder until the appearance of the editorial, which is construed as a reflection on the honor of the Southern white women. It is not half so libelous as that of the commercial which appeared 4 days before and which had been given in these pages. They would have lynched the manager of the free speech for exercising the right of free speech if they had found him as quickly as they would have hung a rapist, and glad of the excuse to do so. The owners were ordered not to return. The free speech was suspended with as little compunction as the business of the People's Grocery broken up and the proprietors murdered. So yeah, that ends that particular pieces. Let's go ahead and look at the footnotes we have here. See what they are talking about here. Always good to look at your footnotes and know what they're in reference to. Sometimes they're not always in reference to something necessary, but it's good if I can separate pages. Secret white supremacist societies such as the Ku Klux Klan and the White Liners flourished after 1867. So they were talking about that in chapter 3 of this particular piece. And she writes about a number of places where they have stuff which is in reference to raids by armed whites, as in these 3 incidents cited by Wells, which she lists as Ellerton, South Carolina, Copiah County, Mississippi, and Lafayette Parish, Louisiana massacres. They were typically directed against groups of African Americans rather than individuals. In the Hamburg case, several members of the African American militia were arrested on July the 4th, 1876 for blocking traffic in the course of their parade. They had refused to step aside to allow passage of 2 buggies driven by whites. In the ensuing riot, several African Americans were killed. So, I can do unto thee, you cannot do unto me. Just a clear case. Now in chapter 4, we have a piece where she talks about a bloody riot. It was a Memphis riot, one of the bloodiest of the Reconstruction era, which resulted in the deaths of 46 African Americans, men, women, and children, the injury of many more, and the burning of 91 houses, 12 schools, and 4 churches. The riot was touched off when African American soldiers from Fort Pickering freed a prisoner from the custody of Memphis police. And then finally, the last footnote. Let's see, where was it in reference to? Anyway, it says, Henry Grady, nationally renowned journalist and orator, was part owner and editor of the Atlanta Constitution. I'm trying to see exactly where she made that in reference to. Oh, that's in the next chapter. My bad. You don't have to worry about that until next time. But yeah, chapter 3. Like I said, it is titled The New Cry. And it's talking about the facts that often there is a need to teach civility, subordination, understanding to the African American community, because they are wild animals and they often have to be punished for dishonoring white women, which of course is sexual assault and rape, but that's what they're accusing, even though they go around and commit the same acts to many African American women or even children. Chapter 4, The Malicious and Untruthful White Press. So, these commercial press outlets, she lists the Daily Commercial and Evening Scimitar that promoted the ideas that which they would write in their own papers, that African American men are aggressive, they're willing to hurt white honor, they are bestial, beast-like, and need to be trained back into a level of submission, which is bullshit. We know it's bullshit. It's so ridiculous. Everything that people went through, and now there is an age where the civil rights of people who aren't white, not just African Americans, are being violated. Usually you think Hispanic, but they've also gone after Native Americans and others because they're of a darker skin tone. Honestly, a lot of these people need punished. If we do not smack back, give them that backhand they deserve, then this is never going to be something that is truly settled. Because a lot of them need a good thumping. Again, not calling for violence, just saying this is kind of what they deserve. Society is so fucked up. It's really annoying looking at where we come and seeing the fact that we're almost right back there. How the fuck do we fall this goddamn far? You know, we looked like we were on the verge of a great society. We knew they were still shitheads who hated people just for bullshit reasons, but we were like, they're in the majority. No. They came out of nowhere, took power, and are destroying any real progress as a society. And there needs to be punishment for it. I will say that. I ain't saying go out and do things, but there needs to be legal, legit punishments. Anyway, we'll go ahead and end this episode here. As always, educate thyself, think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.